readers, welcome back to Reading Realm. I know this review is coming out a little bit late. All three of my pets are sick right now, so I've been dealing with all of that. And then also, recently I got my second tattoo, so I've been a little busy with the appointment and everything, getting that and taking care of that while also dealing with sick pets and trying not to get stuff contaminated, especially since I do have a new tattoo. But I finished one of the longer books that I'm reading this year, which is actually one of the ones carried over from last year. Wind Rider. This book is so good. I finished it literally about 15 minutes ago because I want to get this review out on today's Wednesday. I want to get this review out today, even though I missed last Saturday because I wanted to finish this book before I review it, obviously. But it's so good. The ending is really good. I have the fourth one right here. So as soon as I finish this review, I'm going to start that one because I'm so excited. And the fourth one is the last one, which makes me kind of sad because I really love this world and I really love these characters and I want more of it. But Wind Rider by PC Cast is the third in the series that starts with Moon Chosen and Sun Warrior, which I reviewed last year. And this particular one is really interesting because it introduces a new group of people, which are the Wind Riders, who but they are bonded to horses rather than dogs like the other group of people. You can kind of see, these covers are really reflective, but you can see one of the horses here. Based on the coloring, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Anjo, or Anjo. I don't actually know how that name is meant to be pronounced, but, she is one of the main, the new main character's horse. So, I also mentioned this when I talked about this book before, when I was doing the, reading list, and also the review of the one before this, because I had just barely started this one. But I think one of the protagonists, the new protagonist, is asexual, aromantic, which I think is really, really interesting, because I feel like it's kind of uncommon to find that type of person in a book where that isn't, like, their whole identity. It isn't, like, a book about being asexual, where the character is asexual and everything about them is that they're asexual. This is a character who's very intelligent, very strong, very smart, and really good instincts with her animal, like, tries to do the best for her people, and, debating if that was a spoiler. I think not. But, like, tries to do her best, always, trying to think about what's best for other people, not just herself and everything. She's a really, really cool character and a good leader, and even when she's not actually a leader. But, so the fact that she is all of those things and just also happens to be asexual, aromantic, I think is super cool. And I also think it's really interesting because there's a specific line that happened toward the end of this book that I think is really good for people who may have misinformation about people who are asexual, aromantic, where one character says to her basically, "You don't love anyone, so you wouldn't understand." And she says, "Well, actually, I do love a lot of people and a lot of horses. Just because I don't have romantic love, that doesn't mean that I don't love people, and I have so many people in my life that I care about and love," which I think is kind of cool. I don't think I'm fully asexual, but I am demisexual, so I'm on the ace spectrum, so it's really cool to have representation like that. And this book in general is just really good because it is starting to get to more perspectives, so it is getting a little bit more bouncing back and forth between stuff, because the first book really only had sort of two main perspectives, with a third that kind of happened once in a while. The second one kind of had three that became a lot more prominent, with maybe one kind of thrown in there once in a while, which was Antreus and Bast occasionally had bits for themselves. In this one now, you have three main ones, but they're more evenly split, so it's kind of like one chapter, one chapter, one chapter, rather than like one chapter, one chapter, one chapter, one chapter, random chapter here. But I do think it's really, really good. I think it also is. I want to read the fourth one so badly right now because it ends on a really big cliffhanger. And so that would be my warning is if you do not have the fourth one, the end of this one ends with a really big cliffhanger. It also ends with something that I kind of called early on when some other stuff happened. I was like, oh, I know why that horse did that, and I know why, like, certain things happened that are all spoilers, so I can't say them, but that thing that I kind of figured out from early on did end up happening at the very end, and I was really excited about it, but also the last bit of this, like, the last paragraph is such a cliffhanger, which also was something that I knew was happening anyway because of the split perspectives, but having it written like that just makes it like, but what happens next? So I'm really excited. I think it's also really interesting because I talked a little bit in the other reviews about how in this series, one of the people, or one of the groups of people uses the power of the sun, and one of them uses the power of the moon. And it's interesting because the Wind Riders use the power of crystals, and different crystals have sort of different powers, which I think some people believe in that anyway, like crystals that absorb certain energies or something, but this is like that, but to an actual more magical level. And not to say that anyone who has spiritual beliefs about crystals and healing properties and stuff is incorrect. It's fine if you believe in spiritual things like that. But in this, they are like actually magical to like a level above that, which is really, really interesting, and sort of what the different crystals do. Like, one is for like calmness, one is for clarity, one is for healing, like all the different stuff. It's really, really interesting. Also, I will say this book is also really interesting because I think it shows growth in characters in a lot of different ways, including characters who had already been showing growth, but now they're like actually faced with things where it's like, well, this goes against our tradition, like this is supposed to be different, and then realizing actually it's not so bad. There's a really specific event that I'm thinking about that has to do with that, related to two of the dogs that are traveling with the pack. If you've read this book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But otherwise, I don't want to spoil it because it is kind of a major spoiler. But that scene was really, really interesting. Also, I love this book and I love this author, but I am just kind of upset about one detail because there's a specific dog that she, for the first couple books, and including this book, always writes about him with his tail being super expressive, and like he's always wagging his tail. His tail is always like a big part of stuff associated with him. And something happens specifically to his tail in this book, and I'm really upset about it because like he's fine and he is like alive and healthy by the end of the book, but it's like, no, out of any character that you had to do that to. But I think it makes sense, but also it's sad because I love that character. But I think it's such a good book in general. Like, the whole series is really good, but I like this one especially because I think it's really interesting because you get more of a sense of how the different people like are have to be really careful of spoilers. But basically, one group is kind of stationary throughout this book. Like, they are in the place where they are. And then two other groups are moving around a lot. So it's interesting having that kind of thing where it's like seeing the journey versus seeing what's happening over time in one place. I also will say this book is interesting too because the first two books, I think they all took place in real time. Like, if an event was happening and then the next chapter an event was happening, they were happening at the same time or right after each other in real time. This book is interesting because the first chapter is the first time we see the Wind Riders, and it actually takes place 2 years before how the last book ended. And then as you go through the Wind Rider perspective, it slowly gets closer to modern day, or like whatever you would call it, where the other perspectives are happening. So that's kind of interesting, because the others didn't have that sort of temporal aspect to them. And I think it's also kind of cool because you get to see this character's development over 2 years rather than just like a couple months. But then in the other perspectives, the book does take place over just a couple months. And parts of the journey, like months pass or weeks pass in like a chapter, and parts of them it's like a couple days per chapter. So it's interesting, sort of the time scale of everything, but it's very, very good. And there's also specific characters that I feel so bad for, and then there are also characters that I want bad things to happen to them, because certain characters are a piece of work. And I'm looking forward to, I hope something bad happens to that character in the 4th book, because it's been heavily foreshadowed that it will. So I really want that to happen. And I also think there is another character in this who sort of progressively gets worse. Like, he doesn't start off as a bad character, but he becomes really self-centered and jealous and focused on things that are kind of against his culture's values and is trying to kind of cause problems. And I really hope that he also gets what he deserves in the 4th book, which I think he will, because at the end of this book, and I'm not going to go into specifics because it is a really big spoiler, but he does try to do something that is like 100% outlawed in their culture. Like, it is the highest, like, worst crime. And the protagonist of that storyline also does have evidence of this thing that he had tried to do. So I am really hoping that that he also gets what he deserves, because he's causing problems and he is kind of going down a path where he should not be around them anymore. But it's so good. This book is amazing. Like I said, I just finished it a little bit ago, and so I'm still just like, I want to start the 4th one now. This is really, really good. I cannot recommend this series well enough. I think the world building is so good, the characters are so good, the character development is so good. I think also the diversity of cultures in the world building is really interesting. In this one, there are other people that they meet that are not really a group that has their own perspective the way the people who worship the sun, the moon, and the Wind Riders are. They're kind of like a different group that just gets interacted with, but their culture is fascinating. And even though they're just like a minor thing that they encounter on their journey, they are like fully built out to this completely unique culture. I think it's also interesting because I think in this book you kind of get more of a sense of where this is taking place geographically. I think I mentioned this in one of the earlier reviews of this book, but essentially this is taking place in the real world, but after technology has destroyed humanity so that humans have gone back to nature, and those are the people who have survived in small groups. And so for a long time I was like, okay, this is taking place in sort of the real world, but I wasn't exactly sure where it was set. I think it's set in what is currently the United States, but is no longer at that point, because certain places that they reference in this are very similar to names of real places that are called things similarly to that today. Like, they're traveling through the Rock Mountains, and in the US there's the Rocky Mountains. And stuff like that, where it's just like subtle hints about where they are geographically. And so I think that that's really interesting, because I feel like in a lot of fantasy, it's either a completely fabricated world or it's a world where they try to keep it really vague about where they are. And in this, I feel like to some extent it is. Like, they're not naming really specific places, but I do feel like it is a little bit more like hinting at where they are, which is interesting because I feel like that's less of a fantasy thing and more of a like sci-fi dystopian post-apocalyptic world. Like, we're in the ruins of what was once Seattle or whatever. Like, so having something where it's giving kind of hints about where they are is really, really interesting to me. And I just love this book. I think it's hard because I love the whole series, but I think this one might be my favorite of the three so far, which I have high hopes for the fourth one. I hope it continues to get better. And I'm really excited to see how the series ends, because at this point it's set up a lot of stuff that I think is going to happen in the fourth one. There's been heavy foreshadowing, there's been stuff that's not wrapped up, there's been a lot of stuff like that, and so there's certain things where I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this is gonna happen in the fourth book, but there are also parts where I'm like, I have no idea, like, especially with the temporal changes in this one, like, will the end be a couple months from the end of this book? Will the end be years from now? Like, I have so many questions, and I can't wait. And also just the way the animals are written in this series. I feel like I've talked about that too, but the way all the dogs are written, the way there's now a Wolverine pup, which is kind of interesting, or kit, I guess, not pup, which is a fascinating way that happens. There are the horses, obviously, there's the lynx as well, so all the animals, the way they're written, I feel like it's kind of obvious that this author has spent a lot of time around those animals, just by the way that she writes them, because they're so relatable, and there are times when I'm reading it and I read something about what one of the dogs is doing, and then I look over and Cosmos is doing something very similar, and it's really, really cute. But I highly recommend this book and this whole series. It's amazing, and I cannot wait to start the next one. It is one of the longer books, and this one I think was like 517 pages. And so the other one I think is around that length as well. So it might not be the very next book that I review, just because we'll see when I finish it, but it's so good and I love it so much, and I will try to be back on my upload schedule on Saturdays. This video is going to come out on Wednesday, which is kind of weird, but I wanted to get it out as soon as I finish this book because it is just such a good book, and I've been trying to finish it so that I could review it, and I finally did. It's amazing. I love it so much, and I hope that if you read it, you enjoy it just as much as I did. I feel like I'm still kind of on a good pace for my reading list this year, even though I did take a little while to finish this one, so I'm also excited about that. But this is such a good book, and now I need to go start reading the fourth one. So let me know what you're reading, or if you've read this book. Try to avoid spoilers as much as you can, but leave me a comment, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe. It would really help me out, and keep reading. Bye!